I'm Runam Mehta, CEO of Healthcube. In a country like India, most of our medical expenses are out of pocket. Where curative medicine is concerned, we are not left with a choice. We obviously have to spend money on diseases that already assail us. But where preventative is concerned, I believe not enough is done, either at policy level, at corporate level, or at individual level. Countries like UK are spending a lot of money on screening populations. We ourselves have found that we screened the Tibetan refugee population along the Indo-Nepal border, and we found that more than 55% of that population had anemia, which is a dramatic number to see. More than 60% of that population was suffering from hypertension. Now, these are refugees. They've obviously lived in stressful conditions, and it also spoke about the living conditions that they were in at that point in time. We were actually able to use this population level data, send it back to the concerned authorities who were taking care of the Tibetan population, and it impacted the kind of nutrition that was being provided to the entire population. Hopefully, that will lead to much better health outcomes in the future. Preventative healthcare has application not only at individual level in preventing people from, in finding diseases early, it also has huge implications at the level of huge populations where we can make policy level changes to the food and nutrition and lifestyle of communities. The Indian government has become a lot more cognizant of the fact that there are infrastructural problems and that screening at population level is extremely important to eradicate certain disease burdens that threaten our country. We recently saw the launch of mobile Modi vans. We are hopeful that those will eventually scale up and be able to reach populations in their own community, in their own homes to carry out meaningful screening of those populations. In addition to that, we know that the government is planning to invest in screening populations for tuberculosis and screening populations for AIDS. I think similar interventions are required at specific times for malaria, dengue, and other infectious diseases which we know come up very heavily during the monsoon season and take a huge toll on local communities. India is a heavy importer of medical devices, and companies like Healthcube are hoping to flip this equation. We are an India-made innovation, and we recognize that there are many countries who face the same infrastructural problems that our country faces. Namely, a lot of countries in South Africa, in Southeast Asia, even some parts of the Middle East could benefit from a device like ours that provides access to millions of people. We are CE marked, which gives us clearance to sell in multiple countries across the globe. And we hope to be able to make the impact both in the Indian subcontinent and across the globe with our innovation. To talk about the genesis of how Healthcube came about, our founder Ramanan Lakshminarayanan realized that in this country, most people don't have access to basic diagnostics. And these people include oftentimes pregnant women. He realized that because it is so difficult for women to access doctors during their pregnancy, a lot of people in the rural areas, hilly areas of the country simply don't go for antenatal visits, which leads to very high mortality for both the mother and the child. In order to solve the problem of providing access to diagnostics for this young mother is where the idea of Healthcube came about. Now, creating any medical device is an iterative process. So from prototyping to creating our flagship product took us a number of years. Today, what we have at Healthcube, our flagship product, is a very small device. It's the size of a setup box, and it does 30+ tests on the spot. It's a point-of-care device connected to the internet. Data can be transmitted across the globe instantaneously. The kind of tests it does includes all your vitals. It includes basic blood chemistry like hemoglobin, glucose, cholesterol, and it also does a host of infectious disease panel. Now, let me paint you a picture about why this device is important, right? Imagine you're in a hilly area, let's say of Uttarakhand, and there's a patient who walks into a PHC who has high fever and chills. Now, this person could have malaria, he could have dengue, he could have chikungunya. We don't know what it is. What does the doctor do? Either you wait for 2 to 3 days in order to understand what disease this patient has, or you give him treatment for all 3 conditions. Both outcomes are suboptimal and will cause problems to the patient. Our device can help you diagnose this in under 20 minutes. I've been a startup and entrepreneur for most of my career, and while business challenges remain the same across, business challenges are industry agnostic. I think startups face, in addition to the usual business challenges, a unique set of problems. I'd like to talk about some of them right now. One of the difficulties that a startup faces when innovating is building credibility, because a startup is by its very nature an unknown entity, a new entity in an industry. It takes a lot of resources, time, and many times it's very difficult to get the incumbents of the industry to take you seriously. I believe a number of innovations actually die a slow death simply because they aren't given the adequate time share, attention share that that the industry incumbents should actually be welcoming them with open arms, because innovation doesn't help just the innovator, it always helps the industry at large, it helps the populace at large. Another challenge I find specifically when working with government systems is the high entry barrier. We have processes in place for good reason. We have the tender systems in place for good reason. But oftentimes, the entry into a tendering process, in terms of turnover, in terms of financials, in terms of credit history, are so high that, again, by its very nature, a startup cannot meet those expectations. So even if we have an innovation that can largely impact public infrastructure, it is really difficult for us to come and fight with incumbents on an even keel and make our innovation available to the larger populace. Couple of tips for startups who are just starting out. I would say number one is to build resilience. You will find in the industry, as you go to market, your business model doesn't work, your product may not be accepted. Build the resilience to fail fast and change very quickly on your toes. Be agile. And number two, I would suggest, is to be very lean right from the outset. Make your resources last as long as possible, because you're fighting the long game. You're not here to quickly rise and quickly die. You're here to really, really make an impact in the world, and therefore make your resources last.